Well, good morning. Happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday, August 21st, 2024. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate it. A little bit muggy out there. We had a big, huge, threatening bunch of clouds and thunder and lightning come in last night, but there was no rain. And this happens, right? You know that this happens. Sometimes you can see it, you can smell it. It seemed to me like the temperature dropped about 15 degrees, so it was really nice. I sat outside on the back patio kind of watching it come in, and it was a nice breeze. It was just beautiful, beautiful evening, but no rain. So, I mean, if it had been rain, I would have not been able to sit out where I was sitting. I'd have had to go underneath the covered part, which would have been nice, but it was really nice where I was. So I praise God for the almost rain sometimes also. And I'm sure you do also. We are on the 21st. So there's no more birthdays today or tomorrow. I think the next birthday is on Friday or Saturday. So we'll hold off there. And my father's going in for some tests today. And he's hoping that they can figure out a few things. He's just got a lot of different things going on. Yeah, I would like for you to, if you could keep my father in your prayers. He could use it. He could use the knowing that some people are praying for him, because he's going through some really rough times right now. And I'm hoping to get up there and see him. He lives in Phoenix, but up in Sun City. So I used to drive up to his house all the time when he lived in Central Phoenix, but now he's in Sun City. I mean, it's just a half an hour longer, basically. But it turns a 4-hour round trip into a 5-hour round trip, which is not always the easiest thing to do. But I'll get up there. I promise, Dad, I'm going to get up there as soon as I can. All right. Let's see. And I think that's about it. Nothing else really of housekeeping and note. The in-laws had night number 2 in their new home, and I'm praying that that went well. Night number 1 went well, so that's good. And I think all my family in Chicago that had COVID, they've all recovered, so that's good. And as far as I know, from all my kids, they're all doing fairly good. So we're praising God for that. But let's go into the conclusion of the story. I guess it's the conclusion of the story of Elijah. Maybe it's the pause in the story of Elijah, because he doesn't die, as we'll find out. But Elijah's had a long and prosperous life. God used him for some great things. He healed the widow at Zarephath. He brought fire down upon the offering when the other prophets couldn't do it. He fended off 50 armies of men. He killed all the Baal prophets. I mean, he was a very, very big powerhouse in Israel. And his name means, my God is Yahweh. And he definitely is one who brought back, or was very forceful in showing the people what the power of Yahweh was. And that's probably the legacy of Elijah. Through Elijah, God was able to demonstrate incredible, awesome power over all sorts of things, over the elements, over other people, over life and death itself. And so Elijah will be sorely missed, sorely missed. All right, so let's start reading. We're in chapter 2, for 2 Kings chapter 2, and we'll just start reading at verse 1. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal, and Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Bethel." So remember, Elisha is his sidekick, and Elijah and Elisha go around together doing the things of God, and they are good friends. They're good comrades. They both are followers of Yahweh. And now Elijah is going from wherever he was to Gilgal. And he says, why don't you stay here? The Lord has sent me to Bethel. Now, Elisha must know something's up, because this is what he says. But Elisha said, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. And so they went down to Bethel. The company of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and asked, do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today? Yes, I know, Elisha replied. So be quiet. So apparently, these prophets come out to Elisha and say, do you know that Elijah is going to be taken from you today? And maybe Elijah is older. He would be an older man at this point because of all the things that he's done. And so maybe they're thinking that it's time for him to die. And Elisha says, no, wait. Let's see. Yes, I know. Then Elijah said to him, yeah, I know, be quiet. So Elisha seems to know something's up. These prophets seem to know something's up, but they all want to stay silent about it. And in verse 6, then Elijah said to him, stay here, the Lord has sent me to the Jordan. And he replied, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So the two of them walked on. So they seem to be traveling all around the area. And Elijah is trying to get away from Elisha. And so first he goes to Jericho. And of course, Jericho has significance for the people of Israel, right? Joshua fought the battle at Jericho. Jericho is not too far from Jerusalem. And when they took over the when they took over the promised lands, God gave them Jericho. And this is a unique figure in a unique place in Israel history, as is the Jordan. The Jordan River is also a very, very important point, a landmark. And so Elijah wants to go to the Jordan. And Elisha says, no, I'm not going to leave you alone. As long as you're alive, I'm going to be with you. Almost reminds you of the Song of Ruth, where Naomi says to Ruth, wherever you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. I'm never going to leave you. Perhaps Elijah realizes that as long as he's in an aging state, he's kind of holding Elisha back. And so he wants Elisha to leave him so that maybe Elijah can die with grace, die without all the things going on. But Elisha refuses to leave his side. It'd be as if your in-laws came from a different state, and it's like you want to make sure that their food is cooked and that all the things are done so that they can live a peaceful life. This is what Elijah's. No, you stay here. I'm going to the Jordan River, and he says, no, I'm going to stay with you. So, verse 7. 50 men from the company of the prophets went and stood at a distance, facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. And the water divided to the right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. So this is interesting. People have crossed the Jordan many, many times. But to cross the Jordan, you have to go to various places where they'd put rocks and stones or maybe even little footbridges at certain times of the year. At other times of the year, you can't cross the Jordan because it's got a lot of water in it. But other times, you can easily cross the Jordan if you've got a little bit of help, if you're nimble. Well, Elijah isn't nimble anymore. He's getting older. And so he needs a little of assistance. And so he pulls a little Moses. Moses took his staff, stuck it in the water, and the Red Sea parted, and all of Israel went through, and then Pharaoh's army drowned in it. This is the mini Moses. Elijah takes his cloak, he rolls it up, and he strikes the water, and the water spreads apart. And so he's able to cross. He doesn't need stones. He's able to just cross in the Jordan River, even though there's water in the river, which means that he is getting a little bit feeble. Verse 9. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I can do for you before I'm taken from you." And Elisha says, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Elisha replied. All right, I'm just going to go back here. Yeah. All right. Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit, Elisha replied. I don't know if you've heard of this, a double portion before, but it doesn't mean twice as much spirit as you have. That would be kind of a weird thing to say because Elijah has a lot of spirit, and to get twice as much would be a hard thing to ask, and it's not really necessary because if you have 100% of the spirit, you've got the spirit. But in the times that they lived, they had a way of passing on wealth from one generation to another generation. It's called primogeniture. And basically it meant that the firstborn of the clan would receive the wealth of the entire clan, and he would become the leader of the clan. The way a clan works is that the clan is protected by the clan. Everybody wants security, and the best way to get security, right, is to live with family. And the best way to have security back then is to live with a large family. So if a large family wouldn't just be mom and dad and kids. It might be uncles and aunts and cousins. There might be a whole large 1 or 2 or 3 generations of people that are all together in one clan. And they all pool their resources together to make sure that the clan is whole. And if the leader of the clan dies, then what you don't want to do is to divide that wealth into all the heirs, maybe the sons or the sons and daughters of that person, because then you're dividing up the power of the clan. There's power in all of the people and the wealth staying together as one clan or as one tribe. And so the way that they kept all that wealth and all those people together was very, very common, was called primogeniture, which means that the tribe is more important than the people in the tribe, if that makes sense. And the firstborn son is the one that now takes over the reins from his father of managing the wealth and the resources and the power of the tribe. And the good news is that if the tribe remains whole, then if anybody in the tribe is hurting, then that person who is leading the tribe could send a little bit of extra resources, either people or perhaps money or whatever, to make sure that that person is made whole or is brought back to health. A good son, a good leader of that clan or tribe looks out for the whole tribe. And eventually these types of things become kingdoms or dynasties. So in the kingdom of the south, you have all the sons from Solomon on that are maintaining the kingdom, and each son now becomes the king of the kingdom. But before that, you had primogeniture, which was basically tribal. And the only difference between tribal rule and kingdom rule is a kingdom is bigger. Kingdom rules a whole area, whereas tribe might go from place to place. If they see a threat, they might move around to a different place. Well, when that happens, when you go from primogeniture, from the father to the son, the way that they identified which one was going to take over the tribe was they said that he got the double portion of the tribe. It doesn't mean necessarily that he gets only twice as much as everybody else. It's basically a way of saying that this is now the person that's in charge of the tribe. And so when Elisha wants this from Elijah, what he's really asking for Elisha is, I want to be your heir. And that's what that means. I want to be your heir. And that is not a bad request. Elijah was a very powerful prophet of God. He seemed to know the heart of God. He did some amazing things that we talked about earlier, raising, the widow's son from death, calling down fire on a water-drenched altar, killing all the prophets of Baal. I mean, he was a powerful, powerful man. He will be hard to replace. And Elisha says, I want that. I want to be your replacement in God's eyes to be able to do the things that you did. Will Elijah comply? Verse 10, you've asked a difficult thing, Elijah said. Yet if you see me when I'm taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise, it will not. So I think this is probably something that Elisha does not understand, because the mantle of leadership is not on him. It's on Elijah. And when you have the mantle of leadership on you, it means that you will do things, you will say prophecies of God that may not be popular with the people, and the people may come after you. The same is true with leadership even today. A good leader makes a decision for the health of the organization, but it doesn't mean that the people in the organization are going to be happy with those decisions. Some of them, they may be very upset with those decisions. How many times have you worked for an organization that says, we're going to make this change, we're going to do these things, we're going to implement this new process or new procedure, and everybody complains. Everybody complains. And the guy at the top, or the girl at the top, the leader at the top, has to basically take all those barbs and have all those people angry because of this change that the leader is doing. And so I've said this many times, but leadership is lonely at the top. If you've ever known somebody who's a leader in an organization, it's just the buck stops with that person. And it may seem like a great position. Like today, we're in the middle of the Democratic National Committee conference, convention, Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And that person or that convention is going to nominate the Democratic president nominee. And then, if that person ends up becoming president, I mean, it sounds like a great job, right? I mean, man, think of all the power that I get. But also there's a lot of responsibility, and there are lives of 350 million people in the balance because of the decisions that you make or your administration makes. And that is and nobody else can make those decisions for you. Even if you have a cabinet, nobody else can make those decisions for you. You have to make those decisions. And often you will make a decision that half of your constituents may love, but the other half of your constituents may hate. And so you're going to have hate mail. You're going to have people saying all sorts of manners of evil about you. Leadership is not just fun and games. A true leader has this burden on them. And Elijah had this burden of leadership on him. He could have easily done a whole lot of other things, but for whatever reason, God chose him to do the things that he did in Israel, to manifest God's people and to try to bring God's people back to God, which, as near as we can tell, they haven't done yet. So what makes it even harder for Elijah? Because he's not successful. He doesn't see the success yet of this. And so when Elisha says, I want to take over your job, Elijah's like, are you sure you want this job? Are you sure? But he says, listen, if you see me when I'm taken from you, then you will have it. Otherwise, you won't. It's not for me to decide. It's for God to decide. And this will be the sign to you. Verse 11, as they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. And Elisha saw him no more. Then he took hold of his garment and tore it in two. So apparently, one is he sees Elijah being taken up to heaven. So apparently the mantle has been passed on to him. But the second thing is this great figure has now been taken up into heaven. And that is always sad. If you've traveled around with somebody for a long period of time and you've relied on this person, you've looked for their leadership, and all of a sudden they're gone, that is a difficult time to live. Of course, you're going to tear your garment into two. And you can see the pain that Elisha has from not having his companion and leader, Elijah, in his life anymore. And Elijah, this is the only person that's taken up into heaven like this, right? It is, Jesus is taken up into heaven, but not with the chariot of fire. But Elijah, because of the way he was taken into heaven, there's a whole series of things in the Jewish religion about waiting for Elijah to come back. And so at the Passover meal, they set a chair for Elijah so that he could show up through the door and come in the door. Or apparently when they do circumcisions of male children, they've got a chair of Elijah waiting. At the end of the evening meal, the Havdalah, they mention Elijah. Elijah is a very, very prophetic and powerful figure in the Jewish religion. And what it means is kind of like future hope. We're waiting for Elijah to return. We're waiting for the good times. We're waiting for this power of God to come back so that we can be as we were. I find it, I mean, from a engineering scientific standpoint, you think to yourself, if you go up into the heavens, you're going to die of oxygen deprivation. And the same thing is true with Jesus. I mean, more Jesus you think about, than Elijah, although both of them have the same exit from this earth. And it's an interesting and curious way to leave. When we die and we're buried, it does seem to be a completion. But when you go up into heaven and you haven't died, you're taken up by God into the whirlwind, or in the case of Jesus, up into heaven. It does give you a sense that they're still alive. They're just not visible, maybe. They're still present. They're not visible. And that is a depiction of God also. God is present. He's just not visible. All right. Man, it's why don't we keep reading? So Elisha then picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the cloak that had fallen from Elijah and struck the water with it. "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" he asked. When he struck the water, it divided the right and the left, and he crossed over. So apparently he does have this same spirit on him that Elijah had. The company of the prophets from Jericho who were watching said, "The spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha." And they went to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. "Look," they said, "we, your servants, have 50 able men. Let them go and look for your master. Perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has picked him up and set him down in some mountain or in some valley." "No," Elisha replied, "do not send them." But they persisted until he was too embarrassed to refuse. So he said, "Send them." And they sent 50 men who searched for 3 days but did not find him. And when they returned to Elisha, who was staying in Jericho, they said to him, "Didn't I tell you not to go?" In other words, they thought maybe this whirlwind picked him up and brought him down somewhere else in Israel. So they said, let's go find the guy. Maybe he's hurt. Maybe he's dead. We can bury him. But Elisha knew that Elijah had been ascended into heaven to be with God. And he didn't need these 50 men to go looking for him because he saw where he went and knew that now the mantle has been passed on to him, and they saw it too. So Elisha is now the mantle bearer of Elijah's godly power, and they all know it. They bowed down to him. And Elisha seems to have the wisdom of Elijah too. "I told you not to go. You're not going to find him." And they go and they don't find him. He's like, "See, I told you so." All right. So now Elisha's in charge. Elijah's dead. And now let's see if Elisha can do some of the great works that Elijah did. And I half suspect that he will. And maybe you do too. And we'll see how he is treated by the people. We'll see if the Jezebels of the world also treat him the way Jezebel treated Elijah. But we'll have to wait until tomorrow to discuss that. As we close today, let's close in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for this day. Thank you for your power that rests on us through your Spirit. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, let me go over to over here, see. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you for prayers for my father. I appreciate that. Oh, you got some rain. Oh, look, I'm so happy for you. I saw that it was just coming over the mountain, and I thought it was for sure going to come towards where we were. But it does not surprise me that you got some. Yeah, I could see that from where I was sitting. All right, so tomorrow's Thursday. We'll get together then. Until then, thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you tomorrow. Take care. God's blessings. Bye.